recording. So today we're starting the recording and we're going to cover this table and the meaning of this word and the difference of different word for which how the answers are to be written about the questions and discussions. So tell me anything that you want further discussion about any of these terms that it didn't make sense to you. It is important that you be able to distinguish between two of these terms. Don't understand two of these terms as the same. And
Sir,
also,
can you explain determine?
Determine means you are expected to use a formula or method that you know to calculate a quantity. Example, determine graphically the resultant of two vectors. It means that determine would be used in most cases where you will either be required to use a formula or you'd have to undergo some drawing. That might be some graph drawing, that might be some vector diagram drawing. By either of these processes, you'd have to calculate some number. Calculate exclusively means formula based. Determine it means a much bigger, broader version. This could be actual calculation, this could be drawing, this could be a graph.
Sir, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Example of it.
For example, let's say in a certain question you are given mone koro, let's say in a question is stated like this. I'm saying a question slowly, so try to absorb the information. An object is pushed by two forces. One is horizontal and the other one is or pushed by two forces. Okay, hey. And the other one is making 60-degree angle with the horizontal. The value of these two forces are given. You are asked to draw a vector diagram. So you can go for a parallelogram rule or you can go for a triangle rule to draw this diagram. And you're asked to find out the resultant. Let's say you then find out the resultant. In that resultant drawing, they might ask you that draw a vector diagram and find the resultant of these two forces. That's one way to say that. Or they could directly say you that determine the resultant of these two forces using a vector diagram. Let's say you finish that up. So you find out the resultant force. Then the next part of the question says the mass of the object is some kg. Calculate the acceleration of the object. In that question, calculate would exclusively mean that you are supposed to use a numerical formula, let's say F equals to ma. So you use the resultant force that you did calculate, that you determined from the vector diagram as your force F, use the mass information from the given question, and you calculate out the acceleration.
Sir, I asked about deduce. Nuren asked about determine.
Sorry, I didn't hear that then. Deduce.
আমি deduce জিজ্ঞেস করেছি আর নুরেন determine জিজ্ঞেস করেছিল.
Sorry, I'm the deduce part of বুঝি নাই. দেখতেছি আমি hold up. Don't worry. This may be used in two ways. You find the answer by working out the patterns in the information given to you and drawing logical conclusions from them. You need to use information from tables and graphs and do calculations. Example, deduce what will happen to the velocity of the object, velocity of the vehicle if you have to refer to a law or scientific theory or give reason for your answer. Example, use your knowledge to the kind of theory of deduce what will happen when. Okay, let's say an object is actually thrown vertically in air, and you are given. So I'm trying to give you examples for this, and then they give you some values and ask you to do the entire mathematical calculation, depending upon considering air resistance negligible. So you do that. The basic mathematical calculation considering the acceleration is only the gravitational acceleration, which is 10 meters per second squared downwards. And you have done some, let's say, time calculation, height calculation, blah, blah, blah. You have done some 2-3 mathematical calculation. Let's say in the last part of the question, they say that deduce what will happen to the total time traveling if air resistance was significant. So in such a scenario, you have to use your idea and understanding of air resistance and be able to apply your pre-known knowledge, which is not given in the question. You have to use some part of your knowledge that you knew from earlier and give logical explanation to what is going to happen to the total time. So which means you have to do state and explain both. So deduce would mean that you would require, I mean, deduce basically in most cases mean state and explain, both of them together, but you have to usually use a significant portion of your pre-known knowledge about a certain variation that is not directly discussed in the question. For example, the question is not going to tell you air resistance is the amount of force that the air particles give in the opposite direction of the motion. এইরকম কোনো description of air resistance থাকবে না. They're simply going to say that considering air resistance, if air resistance was significant, deduce what is going to happen to the total time traveling, or they might ask you that deduce what will happen to the maximum height travel of the object. So they're going to ask you this kind of questions. So this is basically state and explain, but with some logical knowledge that you have within yourself from earlier.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure. বলুন, একটা জিনিস আমি একটু হাইলাইট করি, সেটা হচ্ছে ডেসক্রাইব এবং এক্সপ্লেইন এর মধ্যে দুটো ডিফারেন্স আছে। স্টুডেন্টরা এই দুটো জিনিস খুব কমনলি মেস আপ করে। ডেসক্রাইব ইজ এ ভেরি কমন টার্ম দ্যাট কামস ইন দ্য কোশ্চেন। Whenever you'll be asked to describe anything, you don't have to give a reason for why that is happening. Describing something means stating in detail exactly what is happening, not including why that is happening that way. Describe is the description of a certain phenomenon or a certain happening. For example, let's say you throw a simple example. Let's say you throw an object vertically upwards. Describe the motion of the ball. You're going to write, as the ball goes upwards, it slows down, which is to a maximum height where the velocity is momentarily zero. Then it starts to fall downwards and it speeds up and lands on the ground at a lands on the ground at the same speed as it was thrown upwards, considering air resistance is negligible. এইটুকু হচ্ছে description. If they ask you that describe and explain the motion of the object, then you have to say, as the object is going upwards, because weight of the object works downwards, it slows down. That because part is the explanation. That why is it slowing down, that you're incorporating that information as well. So describe and explain means that you have to state what is happening, and you also have to give a reason for why that is happening. So don't mess up the two information. Explain means giving physical reason to validate your answer. Describing means stating what is obvious or what is happening or what is about to happen. Just saying what is going to happen. Not you don't have to give reasons for it. So that actually matters a lot whenever you're thinking in terms of writing volume. So don't mess this up. Anything from this page? Estimate, explain, list, measure, outline.
Sir,
Yes.
so এখানে লিখছে যে you should give us short answer without going into any details or explanation. This অনেক সময় exams এ বলে যে write in details, এরকম অনেক সময় exams এ তো এরকম থাকে write this question answer in details, এরকম তো লেখা থাকে। তাহলে এখানে তাহলে লেখা আছে কেন যে you should give us short answer? মানে
তুমি কত নম্বর বুলেটের কথা বলতেছো?
না, state
আচ্ছা, so you can short answer without going into detail session. আচ্ছা, stay, আচ্ছা বলতেছি, short answer may whenever, I mean, they are never gonna give you that state in detail. That's never gonna happen. Write in detail would either mean describe, or it could also mean describe and explain. For example, if I give you an idea that write in detail how the motion happens for an upward thrown object, that would be described. Write in detail how and why the motion of an upward thrown ball happens, that is describe and explain. Why part incorporates the explain part. How parts mostly incorporate the describe part. But whenever they're going to ask you for a state question is always going to be limited to a single word answer or maybe a single phrase. Their state questions would never be, or maybe it might as well be yes or no. For example, they might ask you that state what is going to happen when this variable is changed this way. Let's say in a single question, if I ask you that, let's say an object is being pushed in a horizontal plane by a constant force. Now they might ask you that state what is going to happen to the total distance covered of the object within the same time if the force was increased. So your single word answer increases. If we have bigger force working for the same amount of time, we can have bigger acceleration. Bigger acceleration will cause in bigger velocity. Bigger velocity will definitely cause the object to cover bigger distance within the same amount of time. So increases is the single word answer that they are looking for. State would always mean a very precise single word answer in most cases. If not, maybe a small phrase. Small phrase in a, for example, if I give a name of some small phrase, for example, let's say they ask you, force is directly proportional to extension. State the name of this law. Hooke's law. You cannot only write Hooke's. You have to write two words. Hooke's law. That's a phrase. Or maybe, uh, uh, or maybe they might also ask you one thing. This is a bit far-fetched from electricity chapter. You haven't, maybe many of you might haven't come across this, but different substances, for example, metals and semiconductors. These are the two basic things that we usually cover in our O-level syllabus in terms of comparison. They behave differently with the temperature, with the change of temperature. So if the question asks you that for a metalware, state a way to increase its resistance, full stop. For a metalware, state a way to increase its resistance. And metalware resistance temperature বাড়লে বাড়বে, এটা একটা property. আবার আরো অন্য দুটো ভ্যারিয়েবল আছে, there are two other variable. For example, length of a metalware, length of any conductor increases the resistance, R proportional to L. So you can also write that increasing temperature, that can be a correct response. You get 1 mark for that. You can write increasing length, that is also another correct response. Another correct response is that if the cross-sectional area of a certain conductor is reduced, then its resistance also increases. So you can also write reducing cross-sectional area. Any three of these responses will score you that 1 mark. So these are phrases which will be very small, very specific answer, and there is not much variety that you can apply to it. Do I make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Just a second. সরি, আমাদের ওই এএস এর ব্যাচের বুকলেট ডিস্ট্রিবিউশন চলতেছে, সো প্যারেন্টস আর নট ফাইন্ডিং আউট মাই কোচিং, যারা একদমই কখনোই আসে নাই। সো আই রিয়েলি হ্যাড টু পিক দ্যাট আপ, কারণ হচ্ছে কালকের পরের থেকে মোস্ট লাইকলি আমাদের কোচিং পুরোপুরি বন্ধ হয়ে যাবে। আই এম সরি ফর দ্য ডিস্ট্রাকশন। বলো ইশাক, বলো, ইউ হ্যাড এ কোশ্চেন। ইশাক জাহিন। হ্যালো, হ্যালো। Ishak has unmuted himself, but he's not saying anything. Ishak, তোমার কথা শুনি না। বলো, আমার কথা কি শোনা যাচ্ছে?
জি স্যার।
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, আর কারো কোনো প্রবলেম আছে কিনা বলো, এনিথিং। এই লিস্টে কোনো প্রবলেম আছে? এই ওয়ার্ডগুলোর উপর বেস করে ডিপেন্ড করবে হচ্ছে তুমি কি লিখবা, কতটুকু লিখবা। এটা আমরা ওভার দ্য পিরিয়ড যখন আমরা ওয়ার্কশিট সলভ করতে থাকবো তখন আমাদের জিনিসগুলো আর ফার্দার প্র্যাকটিস হবে। বাট এনি সিঙ্গেল টাইম ইউ ফিল কনফিউজড দ্যাট হোয়াট উড দিস ওয়ার্ড এসেনশিয়ালি মিন, you can always come back to this list, go through it. If it doesn't make sense, you ask me, I'll help you to understand that better.
Yes, sir.
But if you
Sir,
understand,
estimate.
আচ্ছা,
What
estimate
meant?
বলতেছি কোনটা?
What is meant by?
আচ্ছা হ্যাঁ, বলতেছি। Estimator basically a description বড়. Give an approximate value for a quantity based on reasons and data. You may need to make some approximation. Example, estimate the volume of a test tube. এই টাইপের কোশ্চেন গুলা মোস্ট কমনলি আসে হচ্ছে এ লেভেলস, এএস actually. This type of question are mostly relevant towards checking the students' understanding of physical quantities that is relevant to regular world. For example, মনে করো তুমি let's say you have done a lot of maths regarding velocity and everything. ঠিক আছে, এখন মনে করো একটা খুব কমন কোশ্চেন, one of the very common question that actually shows in our AS level is that estimate the kinetic energy of a 100-meter athlete. Estimate the average kinetic energy of a 100-meter athlete or a 100-meter sprinter. Now, how could you possibly estimate that? You know that the kinetic energy formula is half mv square. Now, what would be a possible value for a 100-meter athlete sprinter? Can you guess how could you possibly approach this problem? I'm actually asking you. Can you have some idea? Anyone?
We don't have the mass.
Exactly. But do you have an estimate what a regular athlete's person's mass can be? Is it going to be 200 kg, 2000 kg, 20 gram? What?
Like around 60.
Around 60 what? Ton?
No, kg.
Kg. 60 kg sounds like a good idea. So let's say the mass of an athlete is 60 kg. তুমি 70 ধরলে হবে, 80 ধরলে হবে, সমস্যা। Don't go for 100. Athletes don't weigh up to 100 kg. 60 to 80 is a pretty good. Let's say 60 kg. Good. Do you guys have any idea what is the typical time frame that a 100-meter sprint happens over? Do you guys have any idea about how much time did Usain Bolt take in his world record? 9 point something second, right? So let's say the average, let's say the average time that a typical sprinter would take is 10 seconds. So 100-meter covered in 10 seconds. So average velocity would be 10 meter per second. So you can go for half into 16 to 10 square. You can calculate that out. And that should give you a number. You are not going to find that exact value that you just calculated in your answer choices. But you're going to get one number which is extremely close to that value. Some other numbers will be extremely far out, in order of magnitude of 10 far out. For example, let's say if I do half into 16 to 10 square, কত হয়? Calculate করে দেখো তো কেউ একজন, কত আসে? আমার ক্যালকুলেটর কই?
3000.
Sir, কত?
Half into 16 to 10 square করলে কত আসে?
3000.
হ্যাঁ, সো একটু ধরো।
Yes, sir. 3000 আসে।
Alright, I'm back. Sorry. That parents just came by. So যেটা হচ্ছে যে ধরো আমাদের আনসার আসছে হচ্ছে 3000 জুল, ঠিক আছে? এখন যেটা হইতে পারে মনে করো তোমার মার্ক স্কিমে অপশন চয়েস গুলোতে আছে হচ্ছে সবগুলো আছে হচ্ছে 4 এর টার্মসে। একটা আছে হচ্ছে 4 × 10⁻1 জুল, আরেকটা আছে 4 × 10⁻3 জুল, আরেকটা আছে 4 × 10⁻5 জুল, আরেকটা আছে 4 × 10⁻10 জুল। এখন কথা হচ্ছে তুমি কোনটাকে কারেক্ট আনসার চুজ করবা? Which one are you going to choose as your correct answer?
একটু আবার বলবেন।
4 into 10⁻3.
একটা হচ্ছে মনে করো
Yes,
4
sir.
× 10⁻1 জুল এ, আরেকটা দিছে হচ্ছে 4 × 10⁻3 জুল, দ্যাট ইজ বি। আমি লিখবো, লিখলে ভালো হয়?
না স্যার বলতে পারেন, আচ্ছা লিখতেও পারেন।
লিখি, সমস্যা নাই।
আচ্ছা
মনে করো এ তে দিছে হচ্ছে 4 × 10⁻1 জুল, বি তে দিছে হচ্ছে 4 × 10⁻3 জুল, সি তে দিছে হচ্ছে 4 × 10⁻5 জুল, ডি তে দিছে হচ্ছে 4 × 10⁻10 জুল, ঠিক আছে? এন্ড তুমি ক্যালকুলেট করে কত পাইছো?
the answer is B.
3000.
3000 sir.
And তুমি এই চারটা ভ্যালুর মধ্যে কোনটাকে অ্যাপ্রক্সিমেটলি এস্টিমেশনের মধ্যে কোনটাকে
B
B B
এসেনশিয়ালি আমাদের ভ্যালু আসছে বি, তার মানে হচ্ছে এটা হচ্ছে বি। বি কেন আসবে? ওই যে আমি অ্যাথলিটের ম্যাচ দিছিলাম 60 কেজি, ওই 60 কেজিকে যদি আমি 80 কেজি ধরি তাহলে আমার এটা চলে আসবে, ঠিক না? কারণ 80 কেজি হাফ হচ্ছে 40, ওখান থেকে 4 আসতেছে। So this is the idea of estimation. Estimation means that you have to have a good idea for what these numbers kg, length, time, momentum, force, what these things actually refer to a regular life scenario. Another common question. So this is what we mean by estimate, that you have to use your basic regular life worldly experience to relate to what these quantities actually mean. And another common question that shows up in our S level in MCQ question is that what is the average mass of an apple?
60 grams or 50 grams.
Now, I believe all of you have had apples in your life, right?
Yes sir.
yes sir
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So what do you think is the average mass of an apple?
100
grams.
Well, you can have a lot of speculation, but there is a simple way to go to understand this thing. Have any of you ever bought apple, maybe from any store or shop or from a vendor? Ever?
Yes.
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 If you have, you might have an idea. I mean, other than actually trying to guess the mass, here's the deal. Try to think in your head, how many apples typically make 1 kg? How many apples typically make 1 kg?
7 8
to 7.
12
Okay, 7, 8, 12. Maximum I'm getting 12. Minimum I'm getting 6. Any other speculation?
7 8.
7, 8. Okay, fine. So here's the deal. Let's say if 1 kg is 1000 gram. If you divide it by 8, how much do you get? 125 gram, right? If you divide 1000 by, did someone say 5?
sir.
If I go for 5, then let's say we get 200. Yes, sir. So in your general
Sir.
understanding of world, yes.
তো
বলো।
এটা কি আপেলের সাইজের উপর নির্ভর করে না?
এটা অবশ্যই আপনার সাইজের উপর নির্ভর করে। That's why I'm asking that in your general understanding of your experience, from your regular life experience, how many apples would typically make 1 kg? That what is your best guess? That's what I'm asking. 5 to 8. Let's say.
5 to 6.
Okay, 5 to 6. And maximum number that I got from you was 8. Let's say minimum I got 5, which means, in your opinion, the lightest apple should be 125 gram. The heaviest apple could be to 200 gram. The answer in that mark scheme was so this was a paper 2 question, not my MCQ question. The acceptable range which was given in the mark scheme was 50 gram to 500 gram. They gave an insane amount of range. Let me tell you what this means. Having an apple of 50 gram means 1 kg would have 20 apples in it. Having an apple a mass of 500 gram would mean 1 kg of apple would have 2 apples in it. You have not seen this kind of small apple. You have never seen this kind of big apple, which means this range is pretty big enough for you to accommodate your answer. If someone is really dumb, they might give some value bigger than this, or they might give some value smaller than this. Now, guessing this number directly is a pretty bad deal, pretty difficult process. Like in terms of gram, how do you have never measured one apple, so how do you know what how much? But going for this procedure makes it much too simpler, does it not? বুঝতেছো কি বলতেছি?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is one of the things
sir.
that what you mean by saying estimate. Aren't interesting question, Boli? This might actually make you laugh. There is this one question that actually popped up in one of the MCQ questions, that what is the average volume of a human head?
What?
Yeah, I'm not kidding you. It actually popped in your NCA exam.
Okay.
What is the average volume of a human head?
1.6 kg, right?
Depends on his
Seriously?
brain, doesn't it?
Not essentially. Average, they said average. They said average. What is the average volume of a human head? And like I said, that all the answers they're going to give you are going to be orders of magnitude different. So even if you get your number close to one of these answers, that is basically your correct answer. Now, how
sir,
could you
you
possibly get your hold on what is the possible volume of a human head in the exam hall? How could you?
Measure your head with a ruler.
Measure your own head, exactly. How do you measure your own head in terms of volume? Do you have that much big of a bucket that you're gonna put your head in and you're gonna have water displaced and you can measure that volume?
Nah.
No. Then how do you
No.
approach that problem?
Estimating.
Yeah.
Guess.
So do you guess randomly? There is a logical way to go for this, which I did, and I could do this.
Here, volume.
The weight of our body, maybe.
No, the weight of our body wouldn't work.
Compare with other objects.
So we
Compare
can
with
use the volume of a sphere.
You can consider the human head as a rough sphere, but how do you measure? I mean, sphere volume use koro. I'm picking this up because I'm gonna go for sphere volume formula হচ্ছে 4/3 pi r cube, ঠিক না? এটা তোমরা জানো?
জি স্যার।
জি স্যার।
Solid
Yes,
geometry.
sir.
Sphere volume formula হচ্ছে
Yes, sir.
4/3 pi r cube. Sphere volume হচ্ছে 4/3 pi r cube. এখন কথা হচ্ছে 4/3 pi r cube দিয়ে যদি আমি আমার sphere volume বের করতে যাই, তাহলে আমাদের human head এর radius লাগবে. How do you calculate the radius of a human head?
So can we
তার
assume
আগে
human head?
ফুটা করতে হবে, তারপরে
Human head to be
রেডিয়াস
like
বের করতে হবে।
মুখের ভিতরে স্কেল ঢুকে মাপবো।
মুখের ভিতরে স্পেল ঢুকে তুমি
No,
এক্সাক্ট
like-
ডায়ামিটার পাবা।
রেডিয়াস তো
তার
লাগবে।
আগে ফুটা করতে হবে, তারপরে রেডিয়াস মাপতে
if
হবে।
we don't
Side by
consider
side.
it as a sphere, we can consider it as a cuboid. Then we can do length into breadth into height, and that's going to be an easier estimation.
Okay, fine.
Sir,
So
circumference
how do you propose that we measure the one of the dimension of the human head? Like if you consider it to be a cube, let's say if you do consider it as a cube, how do you plan to measure the
Your
side?
scale, your scale.
So using your scale, how would you measure it? I mean, yeah, using a scale, obviously you have access to scale, but how do you measure the dimension? That's my question.
স্যার আগে সারকমফারেন্স বের করে এখান থেকে রেডিয়াসটা বের করলে তো হয়।
Circumference কোন জায়গায় মাপবা?
পুরো মাথার সারকমফারেন্স।
মানে
Yeah.
at which level?
স্যার মাঝখান বরাবর।
মানে নাক বরাবর, কান সহ।
হ্যাঁ।
Yes, sir.
Hey, this is actually correct. I mean, I kid you not. What I did, I measured the circumference along my forehead line because নাক বরাবর সমস্যা হচ্ছে নাক হচ্ছে অনেক উঁচু প্লাস কান আছে,
ওইটার একটু উপরে হইলে হয়।
actually full volume না, they are going to occupy much bigger volume. So I actually measured the radius of my forehead. So I put the meter rule 0 mark at the middle of my forehead, then I wrapped it around my head and marked the last point, and then I started with the 0 mark of the meter rule over here, 30 centimeter rule over here, and wrapped it up to the midpoint, and then I found out how many centimeters did I get. From that thing, you can measure up the possible circumference of your own head, which is good. Then you use 2 pi r to calculate the r, then you go for 4/3 pi r cube to calculate the volume. And believe or not, my head is pretty close to the ideal head. I got my answer up to second decimal place correct for the correct answer that was given in the mark scheme. I have a pretty standard head.
Sorry,
What is the ideal size?
Using a scale or a measuring tape?
Now, now think about it. This question popped in your exam. You are never gonna bring up a measuring tape in your exam hall, are you?
না স্যার।
No, sir.
So the only logical thing that you
I
might
don't think
have
it's going to
access to.
work for students.
Yes, বুঝি নাই, আবার বলো।
I don't think this is going to work for students.
Why?
Because you're still very young and you still haven't grown up properly, so your one won't be close to the average, I guess.
Like I said, that the answers are gonna be orders of magnitude different. Let's say if you calculate it in centimeter, let's say the correct human volume would have a 10 power of, let's say 10 to the power 5. Let's say the other options are gonna be 10 to the power
The
3, the
differences
other one is
won't
gonna
be
be 10 to
that
the power 6.
much.
The difference is gonna be extremely wide. That's why you should be able to choose properly or much too easily.
It is difficult to choose.
I know it is difficult. That's why I'm taking so much time to give you an idea of how to handle with estimate questions. Estimate questions are not very, what can I say, very rosy stuffs. But in your O levels, you're not going to have to deal with much to estimate questions. I haven't seen, I don't remember I have seen any estimate question in your O levels, but this is pretty common in AS level, quite common.
Wow.
There is even I can actually show you one thing. I mean, which might make you a bit uncomfortable, but this is the first chapter paper 2 worksheet for the AS level, and the last page of this worksheet reads this. Read the heading.
Oh my god.
I was that much bothered about these questions back then,
Wow.
and this is the best way I could describe them. And just
It's
have a
for
read
all
on.
of those?
No, this is an AS question, AS paper 2. AS.
Okay.
So have a read on. I mean, what do you see? Number of joules in 1 kilowatt hour is possible for you to calculate because you know this thing. Wavelength of red light in a vacuum is supposed to be memorized by you according to syllabus. So you should know this as well. This is also calculable by HOG, but how about this? I just discussed this problem, right? Okay. Let's come over here. The
Sir,
mass
it
of
is
a protector.
impossible.
The mass of a protector. Are you supposed to know the mass of a protector? Have you ever even
Nah.
bought
Kaach nahi yaar.
like 1 kg worth of
I
protector
think
to
we
know
should
how many are
start,
there? Yes?
discovering masses and volumes of random objects from now on.
No, I mean,
Right.
you can try to have the entire point of this kind of question is to check your understanding to regular world. That how much 1 meter per second actually mean. How much 100 meter per second actually mean. 100 meter per second is an insane speed, like insane speed. If you just convert 100 meter per second into kilometers per hour,
100 meters per second.
100 into 18/5 কত হয় দেখো তো? 100 meter per second into 18/5
It's
কত হয়?
360.
360.
360 kilometers per hour. Now, because you riding cars, you might have a good idea, or you might not have a good idea because you have never ride that fast. But you can somehow speculate that 360 kilometers per hour is insane speed. But if you don't understand that by looking at the value 100 meter per second, you are missing the context. You are missing the link between what's the actual value mean and what the number represent. That's the whole point of this kind of questions. Not to bother you, not to steal up marks from you, just to check, can you relate your knowledge to your actual life scenarios? That's all that is about. Here you go. See this? My head volume was the exact average of these two range. So have a look. How much of a big range do they have they given? They haven't given 10 to the power 3 value, but the possible range they have given is from 2 to 9. So if you haven't messed up your calculation by super well, I mean, 2 into 10 to the 3 centimeter cube would be maybe the head of a baby. 9 into 10 to the 3 centimeter cube might as well be the head of a what, like an afro person with a big chunk of hair. Do you know what an afro is?
Sir,
Yes.
Bolo.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
are these the answers? Like allow 2
Yeah.
into 10
These are the
power
answers
3
that these are the answers that I copy pasted from the marks key and pasted over here so the kids would know that what they are trying to look at. These are just some example from the questions. I think I compiled.
Don't they give any sort of MCQ?
Yeah.
Or options?
Here you go.
Wow.
Seriously, sir.
পেপার টুতে আসবে তখন কি এটা 1 মার্কই থাকবে না আরো বেশি থাকতে পারে?
এই যে একটা কোশ্চেনে 1 মার্ক করে তো এই যে 1 মার্ক বাট একবার যে সকল ইয়ারে আসে টিপিক্যালি ওই সবগুলো ইয়ারে 4টা কোশ্চেন থাকে 4টা কোশ্চেনে 4 মার্ক বাট একটা কোশ্চেন 1 মার্ক করে থাকে
Sir,
বলো
did you compile these or was there a separate section for this?
I compiled this by hard work. I didn't make them. I just copy pasted them from different places. Yeah, this is exactly what your worksheet is all about. I mean, if you turn up your worksheet, these have from 2002 to 2013 all the relevant questions of those chapters in a single format. For those who have had your booklets in your hands, I have compiled those things in number according to number, and then I have compiled the mark scheme and the examination. But I brought them from different places and sorted them out for easier access. It took a lot of time when I made them, but there was a time when I used to work pretty hard, but now I don't anymore. I just play a lot of games and sleep a lot and miss a lot of classes, which I'm not very proud about, but that's just what I do. Could I make my point across? Estimate জিনিসটা কথা বুঝা গেছে সবার?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
আরেকটা জন্য কি জিজ্ঞেস করছিল ইশাক তুমি হাত উঠায় রাখছো তোমার কিছু কোশ্চেন আছে
জি স্যার আছে
হ্যাঁ বলো
স্যার state and outline do they have basically the same meaning?
Ideally not. Outline is most commonly used to basically example যেটা mean করছে outline typically goes out for mentioning the steps of a certain experiment that you are supposed to do. For example, outline the method of magnetizing iron bar. They might also tell you that outline the steps to draw the magnetic field around a bar magnet. They might ask you outline the steps to measure to calibrate a thermometer. So outline usually refer to the sequential steps to achieve an experiment.
Okay, I understood.
Okay. Anything else?
What is meant by?
আচ্ছা বলবো একটা জিনিস দেখো এস্টিমেট এবং সাজেস্টের মধ্যে ডিফারেন্সটা বুঝো সবাই এস্টিমেট এবং সাজেস্ট এই দুটো জিনিসকে একসাথে পড়ো এস্টিমেটটা পড়ো সাজেস্টটা পড়ো see if you can distinguish these 2 points properly in your head লেখা তো আছে একটা জিনিস but in your head can you distinguish these 2 things part by part
Estimate gives us a range.
Like in estimate, there's just one correct answers among options, and like suggest there are multiple correct answers. We just have to provide one.
Not essentially. Estimate can also have a lot of correct answers. For example, you can have a huge range for estimation answers. Let me tell you this in a particular. Estimate usually
It's totally
estimate
up to
usually
our opinion.
No. Yeah, obviously. I mean, both estimate and suggest are about your opinion. Your entire copy is about your opinion. That goes without saying.
Yeah, but estimate has a range. Suggest, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Does it have
is mathematical value and
exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. Beautiful. Good pick. Estimate usually goes out for mathematical answers. Suggest usually goes out for reasoning or statement kind of answers. Suggest can have a lot of different answers. For example, whenever they're asking for one precaution of an experiment, any experiment might actually require multiple precautions. So you write any of the valid points, you get good number. Like I said a bit earlier, that if they say, I mean, একটু আগে একটা এক্সাম্পল বললাম না যে মেটালের টেম্পারেচার বাড়ানোর বুদ্ধি কি মানে রেজিস্ট্যান্স বাড়ানোর বুদ্ধি কি হতে পারে so other than giving this as a state question, they might also give us suggest a possible way to increase the resistance of a metal wire. They might use suggest. The answer would be exactly same: increasing length, decreasing cross-section area, or you can write increasing the temperature. Suggest could also mean that any of the correct responses would score you mark either way, and the marking would be built in that way that any of the following 3, they're going to write these 3 options, and any 3 correct would give you that mark. Suggest can also imply this thing. This is where you really have to be worried about. Read carefully. এটা সিলেক্ট করলাম তো আরেকটু সিলেক্ট করতে পারতেছি না হাই এখন কি হবে ওকে গেছে where is the hand Where is the hand? Hand. Okay.
স্যার সাদা ওই জায়গাটা চাপ দিলে হ্যান্ডটা অ্যাপিয়ার করবে হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে
Oh, আচ্ছা, থ্যাংক ইউ, থ্যাংক ইউ, আই লাভ ইউ। হ্যাঁ, এখানে তো সব আইকন গুলা অন্যরকম হয়ে গেছে। শিট। নো নো
ফর্মিল হচ্ছে।
নো, এটা কি হইলো?
স্যার একটু স্প্যান্ড করেছে।
নেভার মাইন্ড, সমস্যা নাই। আচ্ছা, সাজেস্টেড এই পার্টটা দেখো। ইউ আর বিং আস্কড টু অ্যাপ্লাই ইওর জেনারেল নলেজ অর ফিজিক্স অর রিজনিং স্কিলস to a topic area that is not, see what this is. Isn't this highly মানে
This is scary.
Exactly. Brand new printer. Oh yes.
What, sir?
I had one of my printers bought which gave me some firmware problem the moment I bought it. So I sent it for warranty claim. They couldn't solve it. I said that I need that before the Eid. So now they send me a brand new printer for as replacement, which is good.
Wow.
Well, that printer was only, let's say, 48 hours old. I mean, I just bought it, installed it, and then it started to give me a firmware trouble. Okay, so how do you think we could possibly recuperate with a situation like this? Some idea that is not directly in your syllabus. I mean, this is really scary, but what is your proposition that we could possibly do to circumvent this kind of situation?
Relate.
How could you relate to something that you have never come across to know, that they are expecting you to know, but you have never come across that?
Isn't it supposed to be something that we know?
Isn't it supposed to be like general
Common
knowledge?
sense.
Well, common sense is not so common, if you ask me.
Can we just, segregate the problem into different parts and try solving them separately?
You definitely can, provided that you do have the know-how in your brain. Something that is not definitively, as per this option says, not directly in the syllabus.
Which means it might be there indirectly.
So that's my question. How would you know which part of the syllabus is indirectly in the syllabus? For example, let's say you are learning the topic of motions and everything. And the syllabus,
if you know the derivations of and the reasons why each formula or each stance work, you're bound to know how indirectly it can affect other factors.
That is extremely correct. I superbly appreciate this. Did you guys understand what she just said? If you know the correlation between multiple factors, variables, and the deduction of the formula, you'd be able to use those information to go beyond the scope of your syllabus. This is exactly why I teach so much other stuffs which I go on saying, "Ei part two syllabus nai, but tomaderke time porai because I want you to." Have you guys come across this phrase quite often in my lectures?
Yes, sir.
This is exactly why I do this. I mean, let me just show you this part. I mean, in a sort of visual way. I like to do this. Although this is not a very good experience, but I just like to do this to make sense to it, to the kids, every single batch. Here's the deal. Let's say this is the defined boundary of the syllabus. এখানকে এটার ভিতরে যা আছে সবকিছু সিলেবাসে মেনশন করা আছে, তোমাদের এই সবকিছু জানতে হবে। This is the dotted boundary of the syllabus, which means questions might also come using ideas which belong in these parts. Now, if you ask me, how do we know these parts? I'll teach you these stuffs as well. This is where our lecture classes might get longer than what it's required. I mean, if you ask me, the amount of know-how that you are going to require to just be able to answer the typical question paper for this kinematics chapter can be covered in 4 to 5 classes lecture, or maybe less. But we are now doing how many classes? Today's we've been doing classes for like 2 months now, right?
Yes, sir.
Nearly 2 months.
Almost 2 months.
So what is it that we're doing that is taking us so long? I'm trying to cover everything that belongs here and here as well, so that you could relate stuffs in between. For example, you could memorize how air resistance affect the motion without even understanding what is happening. But if you do know what actually happens when the air resistance works on an object, you can answer questions in a lot of different level, of explanation, in a lot of different level of specific information, that eta hoy, etar jonno eta hoy, and that leads them to give out that. So বুঝতে পারতেছি আমি?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
বুঝছো? So this is important that you kids should be able to know this thing. I'm going to teach you a lot of stuff which I will tell you that this does not belong directly in your syllabus, but you kids need to know this. Or this is, I might actually also refer that this is in the dotted boundary of the syllabus, which means this idea can diffuse into here. In many cases, these are the stuffs which belong to the discarded part of the syllabus. For example, মনে করো হচ্ছে একটা certain concept আমাদের গত বছরের সিলেবাসে ছিল, এই বছরের সিলেবাসে বলছে যে এই কনসেপ্ট লাগবে না। আমি তারপরে পোলাপান থেকে এই কনসেপ্টগুলি পড়াই। পড়ানোর দুইটা কারণ আছে। একটা কারণ হচ্ছে যে তোমাদের স্কুলের টিচাররা যখন তোমাদের স্কুলের কোশ্চেন করবে, many teachers don't go through the very specifics of the syllabus and they just pick up past year questions for school paper. And if I don't teach you those stuffs because the syllabus defines that you're not supposed to learn that, you are gonna get stuck in those questions. You're gonna do bad in those questions. Now, if you wonder, sir, school পরীক্ষা ভালো করে লাভ কি? আমার তো O-levels পরীক্ষা ভালো করা দরকার। Well, that's essentially true. But if you are doing bad in a school exam, this is what happens. You get results poorer than what you expect out of yourself. মনে করো তুমি ক্লাস 5 থেকে তুমি 8 পর্যন্ত সবসময় 1 থেকে 10 এর মধ্যে ছিলা, ঠিক আছে? এখন আমি তোমাকে ফিজিক্সের ওই চ্যাপ্টারগুলো পড়ানো দেখে কোন একটা সার্টেন পরীক্ষায় তুমি ফিজিক্সে কম মার্ক পাইছো, তুমি 10 এর বাইরে চলে গেছো, you're gonna be hard, you're gonna be losing interest, you're gonna feel like that physics আমাকে দিয়ে হবে না and stuff like those. You might, if you lose, let's say, if you don't get 80% above marks, you might as well feel like that this is not my forte, this is not a subject that I can be comfortable with. I don't want you kids to have that feeling. তার চেয়ে তোমরা একটু পরিশ্রম করো, আমি একটু বেশি কথা বলি, I'm cool with that. But not being able to answer a question because it's not mentioned in the syllabus or it was discarded from the syllabus is not a good idea in my opinion. বুঝতে পারতেছি?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Yes, sir.
This class is a complete mood. মানে কি? আরিজ, আমি তোমার এই কথাটা মানে বুঝি নাই।
It was a sentence I wrote long ago when you got stuck with that printer thingy and selection. So yeah, that's all. You don't need to understand it.
I don't, but I want to understand it.
It's a thing we say.
Yeah, being a mood means
Yeah, it's like a mood.
I mean, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a fun thing. It's positive. It's not negative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done with that. সমস্যা নাই। So
ক্লাসটা বুঝিস।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, আমার ভোকাবুলারি তোমাদের থেকে কম, I agree that. So এই পার্টটুকু বুঝে গেছে এতক্ষণ কি নিয়ে কাউ করলাম, এই জিনিসটা কিভাবে হ্যান্ডেল করতে হবে বুঝে গেছে? I'll enable it.
Yes, sir.
But you guys have to indulge in the enabling process. Stuffs might look bigger than they are, but you have to be prepared to accept that. You can take time, I'll help you, no problem, but you shouldn't deny this যে না এইটুক সিলেবাসে নাই, স্যার আমাদেরকে শুধু বেশি করে পড়াইতেছে, বেশি করে ম্যাথস করাইতেছে, এগুলা আমাদের পরীক্ষা জীবনে আসবে না। That's not essentially true. They might, and you got to be prepared for the worst, expect the best. That's called preparation. Okay, let's go for the last point. What is meant by, or what do you understand by? You should define something and also make a detailed comment about it. Example, what do you understand by the term total internal reflection? this is the term, or this is a certain situation where you need to go in depth for what you understand by it. You can write about what are the reasons that cause it. You could write about what are the output of that thing. You could write about some possible use of that thing. How much volume of writing should you put to that question is highly dependent on how much mark is allowed. Let me give you some example. Let's say if they gave you exactly this question, what do you understand by the term total internal reflection? তোমরা কি এই টার্মটা কেউ পড়ছো এই পর্যন্ত? ওয়েব চ্যাপ্টার একটা জিনিস এটা, মেবি নট।
স্যার কোন টার্মটা?
এই যে টোটাল ইন্টারনাল রিফ্লেকশন।
Something to do with diffraction, reflection.
Okay, forget about it. ঠিক আছে, আমি এর রেসিস্টেন্স বলি।
রিফ্লেকশন ওয়ার্ডটা পরিচিত।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, সমস্যা নাই, ওটা আমি বলতেছি না, ওটা আমাদের ওয়েব চ্যাপ্টার একটা পার্ট, ওটা বোঝানোর জন্য আমাকে অনেক আগে থেকে স্টার্ট করতে হবে। ফরগেট অ্যাবাউট দ্যাট। লেটস টক অ্যাবাউট এয়ার রেজিস্ট্যান্স। এয়ার রেজিস্ট্যান্স তোমরা খুব ভালো মতন বুঝছো, আই হোপ সো। মনে করো তোমাকে বললাম, কোশ্চেন আসলো যে হোয়াট ইজ মেন্ট বাই এয়ার রেজিস্ট্যান্স, or what do you understand by air resistance? Let's say there are 3 marks to this. How would I write that answer? My answer could look like this, but yeah, I might write this much, that whenever an object moves through atmosphere, as it moves through air, it has to push out the air molecules out of its path and move through it. By Newton's third law, as the object pushes on the air molecules give the object equal and opposite amount of push backwards. The total force produced from all of these collisions makes the air resistance.
Sir, can you repeat it again?
Like
the definition.
It's not essentially definition. This is a detailed comment. A definition of air resistance can be that the resistive force that air gives.
Can you repeat the detailed comment?
Oh, sure. Whenever any object moves through atmosphere, as the object goes forward, it pushes out air molecules from its path. Full stop. By Newton's third law, as the object pushes on the atmospheric molecules, they apply an equal and opposite force onto the object backwards. The total backward force resulting in from all of these collisions creates air resistance. That's going to be my first 3 sentences. Then I'm going to write one more sentence. Then I'm going to write 2 more sentences. Is that because of air resistance, every vehicle has a top speed. Full stop. Air resistance can be useful for parachutist landing. Because if air resistance did not exist, what would happen to the parachutist?
They'd splatter on the ground.
They'd fall and Humpty Dumpty. They'd fall on the ground and Humpty Dumpty. So I'm going to write one bad thing about, I wrote about one bad thing about air resistance, that because of air resistance, every car, no matter how powerful, I'm not going to write no matter how powerful, I'm going to write that every vehicle has a top speed limit. And because of air resistance, parachutists can land safely. So that much is going to be my answer up for a question that has up to 4 marks. Now, what if this question has only 2 marks into it? I'm going to write only up to creates air resistance. I'm not going to go for the usage or benefits of it. Do I make sense?
Yes.
What is meant by, or what you understand by, is basically a type of question where the examiner basically is looking out for your total understanding, in-depth understanding of that thing. Like, what do you understand by it? It means what? That tell me everything that you know about it. How do you comprehend it? How do you articulate it? What do you think it is? Benefits, hazards out of this happening. I mean, what do you understand by, or what is meant by, is a basic checking of your holistic idea of that thing. বুঝা গেছে?
Yes, sir.
Yes. কোশ্চেনটাকে আবার
কোনটা?
এই যে কোশ্চেনটাকে আবার রিপিট করবেন।
What is meant by / what do you understand by air resistance? 3 marks.
3 marks, ঠিক আছে।
নুহান বুঝা গেছে?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's another part. আমি তোমাদেরকে কয়েকটা জিনিস বলি, সেটা হচ্ছে তোমাদের এই সবগুলো পয়েন্ট নিয়ে অনেক বেশি মানে পারপ্লেক্সড হওয়ার বা ভয় পাওয়ার কিছু নাই। These are just indication of stuff that we might come across. Most of the times তোমরা যে most of the cases তোমরা কোশ্চেনের যে জিনিসগুলো পাবা সেটা হচ্ছে calculate, state and explain, describe and explain, শুধু describe, draw, আর হচ্ছে এই তো এই কয়টাই। এগুলো হচ্ছে মোস্ট কমন ভ্যারিয়েবল যেগুলোর উপর বেস করে তোমার আনসার করা লাগবে। এনি টাইম ইউ কাম অ্যাক্রস এ নিউ টার্ম that you are not sure about how to write that answer, refer back to this table so that you can find out what you are supposed to do in response to that question. It is very important, kids, it's very important that you write precise answer. Go for exactly what you are asked for. You write weird stuffs, random stuffs, maybe relevant stuffs, but that's something that was not asked in the question. You are not scoring marks. You are simply making your answer longer, making it difficult for the examiner to look out for spaces where they should give you positive marks. So ultimately you're making a bad expression of yourself to the examiner. There is no need for this. If you know precisely what you are asked for, you deliver precisely that and you get good marks. It's that simple. এবং প্রিসাইজলি আমরা কি লিখবো সেটা প্রপারলি আয়ত্ত করার জন্যই তোমাদেরকে কোশ্চেন পেপারের সাথে মার্কস স্কিম এবং এক্সামিনেশন পেপার আমি একসাথে দিয়ে দিয়েছি। I mean, I did not give you the solutions so that you could copy all the answers from the mark scheme to the question paper. That doesn't help anyone. I gave you those things so that you could build up the idea that what is the type of wording, what is the amount of writing that the examiners are actually looking out for, so that you can start thinking about like the examiners, which is the best level of excellence. কিছু বুঝলা?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
ওকে, মাগরিবের আজান হয়েছে?
না স্যার, এখনো 15 মিনিটের মতো বাকি আছে।
না স্যার।
তাহলে আরো কিছুক্ষণ কথাবার্তা বলি, then we might as well take a break. তোমাদের কি এই ফার্স্ট চ্যাপ্টারের লিস্ট পড়াইছিলাম? এগুলো কি পড়াইছিলাম তোমাদেরকে? Yes or no?
No, sir.
আচ্ছা, যারা পাইছো তারা তোমাদের বুকলেট থেকে দেখো যে থিম 2 যেটা আছে নিউটনের মেকানিক্স, না থিম 2 না, ইয়া পর্যন্ত এই যে মানে টপিক 2 এবং টপিক 3 তে মিলায় যে জিনিসগুলি আছে সেই জিনিসগুলি তোমাদের বোঝা যাচ্ছে কিনা। আমি এটা এখানে যারা পাও না এখনো বুকলেট পেয়ে যাবা হোপফুলি কালকে। I actually messed up in my মানে delivery process. I was trying to do it manually and I really messed up and they didn't pick up the delivery the day before yesterday because I messed up in the recording system. So then I handed it over to my assistant who is really expert in this. If you wonder how did that happen, because my assistant Mamun, he actually pretty much is managing the entire delivery system of Soul's books. He's a pretty amazing guy, good writer of books, English books, helpful books to be honest. So I handed it over to him and that's why the whole page thing and the address thing came up, and today they are receiving my book. They actually showed up and actually did take my parcels. So যারা এখনো পাও নাই তারা একটু এখান থেকে পড়ে দেখো যে কোনো পার্টে ঝামেলা আছে কিনা। আমি আস্তে আস্তে এটা নামাতে থাকবো, or maybe I can actually put it into auto mode. Can I put it into small auto mode? Like, no, this doesn't help. What? Just
এখন
কোনটা?
না স্যার, এখন লাইক ব্রেকতে কিছু দিয়েছিলেন?
এই যে এগুলো পড়তে বলছে, এই বুলেটগুলো নিয়ে কোনো কোশ্চেন আছে কিনা দেখো, বা এই টপিকগুলো মাথায় আছে কিনা।
Sir,
বলো।
sir, could you find non-uniform acceleration?
Non-uniform acceleration are the part of the accelerations where your VT graph is not a straight line. For example, for the parachutist, beyond the first couple of seconds, still he reaches the terminal velocity. Then when the parachute gets opened, from that point till the point he reaches another terminal velocity. All of these parts are non-uniform acceleration.
The curved parts.
The curved parts. Every curved part of the VT graph represents a non-uniform acceleration where you don't have a fixed value of gradient.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Sure.
Non-uniform retardation.
Acceleration and retardation pretty much mean the same thing. Acceleration typically means speeding up. Retardation means slowing down. So one would mean velocity increasing, another would mean velocity decreasing. তোমাদেরকে এখন আমি ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম শেখাই নাই, শিখাইছি?
না স্যার।
আচ্ছা শুনো, এটা যেহেতু আজকে যেহেতু আমাদের বন্ধের আগের লাস্ট ক্লাস, তোমরা তোমাদের ওয়ার্কশিট থেকে এমসিকিউ সবগুলো ট্রাই করবা। ডেন্সিটি মানে চ্যাপ্টার 11 এর চ্যাপ্টার মানে টিকার টেপের আগ পর্যন্ত এমসিকিউ সবগুলো অ্যাটেম্প করবা। সবগুলো যে পারতে হবে এমন কথা অ্যাটেম্প করবা। বলো
তারপর একটু বলবেন
আপনি যে
কতটুকু পর্যন্ত?
আচ্ছা বলতেছি, হ্যাঁ বলো।
আপনি যে এমসিকিউ গুলি দিয়েছিলেন সেগুলি কি আমাদের ইয়াতেই পাবো, লাইক মেসেঞ্জারে, নাকি ওগুলো হলো আপনি ওয়ার্কশিটে দিয়েছেন?
না না, সবকিছু ওয়ার্কশিটে দিছি তোমাদের। মেসেঞ্জারে তোমরা যা পাইছো, দাঁড়াও মেসেঞ্জারে তোমরা কি পাইছো?
হ্যাঁ, ওই যে the shared files, ওগুলি কি
দেখতেছি আমি, দাঁড়া এক মিনিট।
What the heck?
What? What? My head?
না না স্যার, কিছু না।
Yeah, I used to have a head like this. I was being bald and halfway in the process I took a picture that got stuck. চুল ফালাই দেওয়ার মধ্যে অন্যরকম আনন্দ আছে। এইখানে তো তোমাদের শুধু নোটসই দিছি, আর কিছু দিই না। ওয়ার্কশিটগুলো সব তোমরা প্রিন্টেড ফরম্যাট পাবা। সো তো বলতেছি আমি কি কি পাবা। যারা পাইছো তারা দেখছো, যারা পাওনি তাদের জন্য দেখাচ্ছি আমি কি পাবা। এটা আছে হচ্ছে এই জায়গায়। আমি তোমাদের হোমওয়ার্কের পার্ট 2 বলে দিতেছি যাতে করে তোমাদের কনফিউশন না হয়। এটা হচ্ছে তোমাদের পেপার 1 কম্পাইলেশন। তোমাদের ফার্স্ট
স্যার আমারটা প্রবলেম আছে, করেছি কিন্তু প্রবলেম আছে।
হ্যাঁ, প্রবলেমগুলো আমরা যখন সলভ ক্লাস দিব তখন বলতে হবে।
আচ্ছা এটা করব হোমওয়ার্কে?
না এটা করবা না, এটা আমি তোমাদেরকে এখন এইগুলা রিডিং টিং কিভাবে নিতে এগুলো শিখাই নাই। চ্যাপ্টার 1 এমসিকিউ আপাতত না করলে সমস্যা নাই, এটা স্কিপ করতে পারো। বাট ইফ ইউ ক্যান ট্রাই, আই মিন দ্যাট ইজ অলওয়েজ ওয়েলকাম। এরপর হচ্ছে চ্যাপ্টার 2। এই চ্যাপ্টার 2টা পুরোটা ট্রাই করতে হবে। চ্যাপ্টার 2 পুরোটা ট্রাই করব।
চ্যাপ্টার 2 এমসিকিউটা করব।
হ্যাঁ, অ্যাটেম্প করবা। সবকিছু পারতে হবে এমন কথা না, বাট অ্যাটেম্প করবা।
আচ্ছা স্যার।
আর যেগুলো পারবা না সেগুলো মার্ক করে রাখবা, সেগুলো আমরা পরে আলাপ করব। এরপরে আর চ্যাপ্টার আছে হচ্ছে টিকার টেপ। এটা আমি আজকে তোমাদেরকে একটু পরে শিখাই দিব, যাতে করে তোমরা অ্যাটেম্প করতে পারো। এটা এইটুকুই, জাস্ট অল্প কিছু এমসিকিউ আছে। টাইম গ্রাফটা অ্যাটেম্প করতে। টাইম গ্রাফটা মানে তোমাদেরকে আমি সলভ করাইছিলাম কি? এটা আমি করাইছিলাম তোমাদেরকে না এবার?
না স্যার।
এটা অ্যাটেম্প করবা, না পারলে আমি পরে হেল্প করব। and then this one gets finished. তুই তো আম খাবি না, এরকম করস কেন? Sorry, I was talking to my cat. So এই পর্যন্ত চ্যাপ্টার 1 বাদ দিয়ে এই ইলাস্টিসিটির আগ পর্যন্ত এর পর্যন্ত হচ্ছে তোমাদের এমসিকিউ হোমওয়ার্ক। 1 2 নাম্বার হচ্ছে পেপার 2 যে কম্পাইলেশনটা পাবা, বা 2 কম্পাইলেশনটা হচ্ছে এইটা, ইটস ভেরি বিগ। এটা শুরু হচ্ছে এখান থেকে। এইটা তোমরা ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম ছাড়া বাকি যা কিছু আছে সবই ট্রাই করবা। আর মেবি আজকে আমি তোমাদেরকে ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম কেমনে করতে হবে দেখাই দিতে পারি। শুড আই ডু দ্যাট?
স্যার ওটা কি কম্পাইলেশন কত?
এটা এই কম্পাইলেশন 1। এখানে কম্পাইলেশনের সিকোয়েন্সগুলো পারফেক্টলি ঠিক নাই। মানে আমি পেপার 2 কম্পাইলেশনের সিকোয়েন্স করছি একরকম অর্ডারে, পেপার 1 এর কম্পাইলেশন সিকোয়েন্স হচ্ছে একরকম অর্ডারে। সো ইটস এ বিগ মেস। সো disregard the numbering but look out for the topics.
আচ্ছা স্যার।
So এখানে এটা পার্ট 1 পার্ট 2 করা ছিল, কারণ যখন আমরা স্টুডেন্টদেরকে স্ট্যাপলার করে ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল ওয়ার্কশিটস দিতাম তখন দুইটা পার্ট একসাথে স্ট্যাপলার করা যেত না, দ্যাটস ওয়াই देयर আর টু পার্টস টু ইট। আই ডিডন্ট বদার টু মার্জ देम, সো ইটস অল হিয়ার। যেমন এখানে তোমাদের একটা ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম আঁকতে বলছে, এন্ড ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম কিভাবে আঁকতে হবে যদি আমি আজকে তোমাদেরকে পড়া শেষ করতে পারি তাহলে ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম করবা, আর যদি পড়া শেষ করতে না পারি তাহলে ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রাম করার দরকার নেই, ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রামগুলো স্কিপ করবা। ভেক্টর ডায়াগ্রামগুলি ছাড়া বাকি যত রকমের কোশ্চেন আছে, গ্রাফ, টাফ, হ্যান ত্যান, হাবিজাস, ইজাবি আছে, এগুলা অ্যাজ মাচ অ্যাজ ইউ ক্যান ট্রাই করবা, অ্যাটেম্প করবা। তুমি না পারো সমস্যা নাই, তুমি যদি অ্যাটেম্প করে না পারো ইউ ক্যান লুক আউট ফর হেল্প ফ্রম দ্য মার্কস দেখে যদি বুঝো বলেন ডান, যদি না বুঝো তাহলে মার্ক করে রাখবা, সেটা আমরা যখন ক্লাসে যখন সলভ করা শুরু করব তখন আমাকে বলবা স্যার এটা পারি না, এখানে এই মার্কসটা বুঝি নাই, এক্সামিনেশন রিপোর্টে এরকম একটা লাইন ছিল, এই লাইনটার সিগনিফিকেন্স কি এটা বুঝি নাই। all sorts of relevant questions will be answered to my best capability. বুঝতে পারছি?
Yes, sir.
ঠিক আছে, এটা অনেক মোটামুটি ভালোই বড় একটা ওয়ার্কশিট, সো পুরোটুকু যে তোমরা একবারে করতে পারবে এরকম না, যতটুকু পারো ঈদের বন্ধে তোমাদের অন্যান্য সাবজেক্টের প্রেশার আছে, যতটুকু পারো ততটুকু অ্যাটেম্প করবা, কারণ ঈদের বন্ধের পর আমি এই যে এটা হচ্ছে পার্ট 2 বিরাট বিরাট মানে কি মোরলেস দুইটা পার্ট হাফ হাফ, একই টাইপের কোশ্চেন আছে অনেকগুলি। শেষ আর হয় না, হ্যাঁ শেষ আর হয় না, হ্যাঁ এই যে এখান থেকে ইলাস্ট্রেশন শুরু হয়েছে এর আগ পর্যন্ত যতটুকু পারো ততটুকু ট্রাই করবা। আই উড হাইলি রেকমেন্ড যে তোমরা P1টা আগে ট্রাই করবা, P1টা প্রেফারেবলি শেষ করে ফেলবা, আর P2টাও যতটুকু পারো ততটুকু ট্রাই করবা। আমি কোনো জোরাজুরি হোমওয়ার্ক দিচ্ছি না, বিকজ আই রিয়েলি ডোন্ট ওয়ান্ট ইউ টু ফিল প্রেশারাইজড যে স্যার এত হোমওয়ার্ক একসাথে দিছে মাথা খাই ফেলতে হবে। নো, ইফ ইউর প্যারেন্টস আস্ক ইউ, স্যার বলছে যতটুকু পারতে ততটুকু করতে, এবং যতটুকু করবা ততটুকু বুঝে করো, এটুকু হচ্ছে রিকোয়েস্ট। র্যান্ডম আমি তুমি হন করে অনেক কিছু করতেছো, মার্ক স্কিম থেকে আনসার কপি মারতেছো, এগুলি করার দরকার নাই, একেবারে দরকার নাই। কিছু বুঝলা?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
আগে বলবান তোমরা কিছু বুঝছো, বুঝলে কিছু একটা রেসপন্স করো। Yes or no?
Yes, sir. বুঝেছি।
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes.
সবাই তো কথা বলতেছে না, there are like 39 people, so I think
Yes,
I
sir.
have about 12 to 13 people.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Okay,
বুঝছি
I can
স্যার।
live with that. আচ্ছা শুনো, it's about Maghrib time, we're going to take 10 minutes break, we're going to resume class at 7.05. ঠিক আছে, আপাতত এখন ব্রেক শুরু হচ্ছে।
স্যার 05 না 010 দেন।
না অলরেডি এখন 6:55 বাজে, এই যে দেখো আমার ঘড়িতে 6:55
ও
বাজে।
হ্যাঁ বুঝছি
আমি
স্যার।
10 মিনিট টাইমে দিচ্ছি, 10 মিনিটে বই আসতে পারবা।
ঠিক আছে স্যার।
Hello everyone, we're resuming the class. So কথা শোনা যাচ্ছে?
জি স্যার।
Physics lecture number 7, drawing vector diagrams. A scalar quantity is just a size.
দেখাইছিলাম
না স্যার।
like never, vector diagram, acceleration, weightless, circular motion, prefix, equation motion, continuous equation method, practice in Asia, complex equation না দেখাই নাই, ঠিক আছে ভাই। এই ভিডিওটা দেখো, আমি এটার ক্রেডিটস দিয়ে দিব।
Or magnitude. Examples of scalar quantities would be 10 meters per second or 20 pounds of pressure. Now, a vector has both size and direction. So here's some examples of vectors. 10 meters per second west, okay, size and direction. 20 pounds of pressure pushing down. 20 pounds is the size and the direction is pushing down. Speed is a scalar quantity. 10 meters per second is a scalar quantity because it tells us how fast and how much better. For example, so what I'm going to do is to indicate, we'll draw an arrow pointing up to indicate 6 miles north. So what I'm going to do is, see if I can do this correctly. I'm going to draw a arrow, and I'm going to make it 6 centimeters long. So let's see if I can do this right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. We'll do that. Put it down right there. So this vector is 6 centimeters long. So the length of the vector, 6 centimeters, represents the magnitude of the vector, 6 miles. So 6 centimeters represents 6 miles. It's pointing up. So the upward pointing direction represents the northern part. And then this part of the vector right here, this is the head of the vector, and this end right here is the tail. All right, so the tip of the arrow is the head, and the other end of the arrow is the tail. The arrow points up to indicate that the vector is pointing north, and we make the arrow 6 centimeters long to represent a scalar quantity of 6 miles. So that's how we use a vector or arrows to represent vectors. The length represents the magnitude, and the way the arrow is pointing represents the direction. Now suppose we want to draw a vector to represent a velocity of 90 meters per second in a direction 30 degrees north of west. Well, we start by drawing x and y axes and label them with compass headings. So we draw a y-axis and an x-axis, and we label them with compass headings. And then let's see how we can start drawing this. 30 degrees north of west can be read as 30 degrees above the west axis. So we're going to draw a line starting at the origin of the graph, right here, and have it point 30 degrees above the west axis. So here's the west axis, and it's going to be 30 degrees above the west axis. So you're going to need a protractor and measure 30 degrees. So 30 degrees is right there, all right? And then I'm going to do part of this in pencil. So, starting from the origin, and we draw it like that. So this is just a rough graph like that. Okay. And then, so this is going to be 30 degrees right here. And then to represent the 90 meters per second, we'll draw the line 9 centimeters long. So 9 centimeters, let's see. All right, so it's going to end right there. Okay, so now we can fill everything in. Like that. Okay. All right, so this is going to be 9 centimeters long to represent the magnitude. 30 degrees north of west, so that's going to be 30 degrees right here. So that's 30 degrees above the west axis, or 30 degrees north of the west axis. So let's sort of summarize. 30 degrees north of west can be read as 30 degrees above the west axis. We draw a line starting at the origin of the graph and have it point 30 degrees above the west axis. And to represent the 90 meters per second, we draw the line 9 centimeters long. All right, so this vector is pointing 30 degrees north of west. So this is 30 degrees north of west. And it's also pointing 60 degrees to the west of south. See, this angle right here is 60 degrees. So, or 60 degrees to the west of north, or 60 degrees to the left of north. So 30 degrees north of west can be expressed as 60 degrees west of north, and that's because the angle between the west axis and the north axis is 90 degrees, and 30 plus 60 gives me 90 degrees. All right, so that's how you draw diagonal vectors. If they don't give you north, south, east, or west, if they give you, 30 degrees to the north of west or 20 degrees south of east, that's how you do it. Well, we can solve problems by drawing vectors and adding them together. So here are the rules for drawing and adding vectors. Now these rules aren't going to make sense until you see them done, but we're going to read them out anyway. So keep these in the back of your mind as we go through the process of drawing these. So the first rule is you draw the first vector, and I like to put a big dot at the tail of the first vector. And then you place the tail of the second vector at the head of the first vector, and then you draw a line from the tail of the first vector to the head of the second. So let's do a problem that illustrates these three rules. A man walks 12 meters north, then 8 meters east. Find his displacement and direction. So we'll first start by drawing a 12 centimeter line pointing north to represent the first vector. So the first vector is 12 meters north. Let's draw a 12 centimeter line pointing straight up. So I'm going to do it in pencil first. So let's see here. All right, 12, there we go. All right, so I'm going to do this. Can we see it on the inside? Yeah, okay. So just do it straight up like that. So that's our first vector. And then we'll ink it in. Look, sorry. Down there. Okay. Not the prettiest, but it works. All right, so our first vector to represent 12 meters north, we draw a line pointing up or north, and we'll make it 12 centimeters long to represent 12 meters. Now the second vector is 8 meters east, and so what we can do is 8 meters east, let's see. So that means that the second vector kind of looks like this. All right. It's, excuse me. Okay, so we can write that with an 8 centimeter line. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this second vector and move it over so that the tail of the second is at the head of the first. And before I forget, every time we draw these problems, you always put a big dot at the tail of the first vector. All right, so here's the tail of the first vector. I always put a big dot next to it. All right, and then we do that. All right, so I'm just basically going to slide this over and put the tail of the second vector at the head of the first. So we'll do this. Okay. All right, so this is 8 centimeters. Like that. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line from the tail of the first vector to the head of the second vector. Okay, so to review the steps, we drew the first vector, we drew the second vector, and when we drew the second vector, we put the tail of the second vector at the head of the first, and then we drew a line from the tail of the first to the head of the second. Now, the final line drawn here is the resultant. All right, so this line is called the resultant. And if you measured the length of the resultant, it would be 14.6 centimeters. So 14.6 centimeters, approximately. All right, you're not going to get exact answers, and you might be off a little bit, but if you're close to this, you're doing all right. Now, if you convert this to meters, we would call this 14.6 meters.
You see, he's not using equal.
So,
using an arrow. Why is he using an arrow? Because 14.6 centimeter is not 14.6 meter. As per the drawing was done with a scale of 1 meter was every meter for the original length was represented by 1 centimeter. That's why he did this conversion from centimeter into meter just by changing the unit. This is not equals to that. This means that in the actual math. That's why he used an arrow. What is missing over here is that other than simply drawing this line by a horizontal assumed line, we have to understand that between the north and the east, there should be a 90 degree. It would have been a much better process if he used a protractor to find out the 90 degree line. When you place the protractor in this direction and give a dot over here and draw the 90 degree line like that, because you have to make sure that this much is supposed to be 90 degree. That would have been a much better process, but he didn't do this, but you should.
Our man's displacement who walked 12 centimeters and 8 centimeters, or 12 meters and 8 meters, his displacement from where he started to where he ended is 14.6 meters. All right. Now, if we make the tail of this first vector the origin of a graph to figure out the direction, so what we do is at the tail of the first, you draw compass points. So this is going to be south, and this is going to be west, and this is going to be east, and this direction is north. All right, well, if we make the tail of this first vector here the origin of the graph, the resultant, this line right here, points 35 degrees to the right of north, or 35 degrees to the east of north. So if you take your protractor and measure this angle right here, it's going to be pretty close to 35 degrees. All right. So this direction then is 35 degrees to the east of the north axis. 35 degrees east of north. All right. And by the way, this angle right here is 55 degrees. So another possible answer is that we could also call this 55 degrees above or to the north of the east axis. North or above the east axis. So our resultant vector is 14.6 meters, 35 degrees to the east of north. Or you could say 14.6 meters, 55 degrees to the north of east. All right? So that's how you draw vectors to solve how far someone's moved and in what direction they're moving.
Okay, so I'll now take questions. I'll definitely take this, put it in my here so that I could use it for the credit sharing. Bolo, question bolo, Polovan. Someone raised their hand, I believe.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, how do we determine the direction of the vector? Will it always be mentioned in the question?
You would have privilege to find out the direction of the vector, for example, because in this case, the values were given in terms of the empirical direction, northeast, south to south. So you could actually put up your protractor and you could either write this answer as 35 degrees east of north or 50 degrees north of east. But this is not always going to be the case. For example, let's say if you apply some force with a horizontal or something like that. For example, let me show you one specific question over here. This is north and west, so this can be done in that fashion, which is perfectly all right. But if I go for another form of, not this one, for example, this one, have a look. A microphone has a weight of 6 Newton. It is suspended by wire X from the ceiling in a radio studio. Figure 1.1 show the microphone held in correct position by a horizontal wire Y. The tension T in the wire Y is 8 Newton. Use a vector diagram to determine the magnitude and the direction of the resultant of W and T. So if I just select up this picture and take it out for my drawing board, it's right here. And let's try and have a look at it. Okay, I don't want it like this. I want it like this preferably. And okay, so the microphone has a weight of 6 Newton. Weight should always work vertically downwards, and the tension of the wire is horizontal, which is 8 Newton. So what we can do, we can draw a vertical arrow of 6 centimeter, and we can draw a horizontal arrow of 8 centimeter. But there should be 90 degrees between this. So how should you try to achieve this drawing? I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So let's say.
What do you mean by tension?
Tension means pulling force. Pulling force.
Okay, sir.
So let's say you're going to use your ruler to draw a vertical line over here, as vertical as you can make it, and the length of this thing should be 6 centimeter. One of the things that he showed in his video, that these forces were labeled as their length, but as per your CIE syllabus, you should label them as their actual value. For example, in this case, the vertical force, you can give the arrowhead at the top, you can give the arrowhead at the middle as well. Anywhere is good, doesn't matter, but don't preferably give it at the end, top or at the middle. So I'm going to label this force as 6.0 Newton. That's my first force. Then I'm going to take out my protractor, and I'm going to place up my protractor in this fashion. I'm going to drop the protractor over here, but I'm going to rub it off pretty soon. So I'm going to put up my protractor in this fashion, find out, give a dot at the 90 degree mark, and I'm going to remove the protractor and draw the horizontal line so that I know for a fact that there's a perfect 90 degree over here. So this is a vertical force, this is a horizontal force. So I'm now erasing the protractor. So let's say the protractor is not here anymore. Then I'm going to draw the second force, which is going to be of length of 8 centimeter along the horizontal line. Let's say this will be my horizontal force of, let's say, 8 centimeter.
We can also draw that at the top.
We can, but if we go for that, this is going to be parallelogram rule, which I'm going to cover after a while. Okay, so this is the triangle rule where we place the vectors one after another. So this is one way to do this. I'm going to cover parallelogram rule in a bit. So you can do this. So this will be your 8.0 Newton. So because the question says that we have to show the two vectors by two names, W and T, you can always do this. W equals to 6.0 Newton, and then you write over here T equals to 6.0 Newton. Now you are trying to find out the resultant. So all that is left is that you draw a straight line starting from the first starting point of your first vector, or the tail of your first vector, as the teacher said in the YouTube video, and you complete this figure. The resultant is going to be aimed in this direction. You can label this as R. And
Sir, এখানে magnitude কি হবে?
Magnitude কি হবে সেটা আমি বলতেছি, এখনো পর্যন্ত বলি নাই. So you're going to draw this up. After you have drawn this up, you need to measure using a ruler how long this is. Whatever the number of centimeters that you get is going to be exactly to your answer for the Newton, because here we have drawn this graph in a scale of 1 Newton for 1 centimeter. So that's going to perfectly work for your purpose. So eta howar kotha logically, I know this from Pythagorean law, root over of 8 square plus 6 square gives you 10. So this should be approximately 10 Newton. So you can write this as 10.0 Newton, or you can
Well, you just basically considered 6 centimeters and 8 centimeters.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because this is a 90 degree, that's why I could calculate this in my head. If this was not a 90 degree, I would have definitely take the measurement. This would be approximately somewhere around 10 Newton. But in your mark scheme, you're going to have a pretty big range for this accepted value. I'm going to show you the mark scheme in a bit. So it's going to be about that, approximately that. So I'm going to give an approximate sign. But you should also sign. It karo. What is pretty important that in your vector diagram, you should always prefer to write whether the question asks it or not. If the question asks it over here, you should write it over here. If the question doesn't ask it over here, preferably always write the scale. So you should write like this: scale 1 centimeter is to 1 Newton. That's what you use in this figure. So that goes without saying. Now, how are you going to give the direction? So এখানে magnitude আসবে হচ্ছে about, let's say, 10.0 Newton, which is obvious. You have to give this up to 1 decimal place, because all the given values are given up to 1 decimal place, 8.0 Newton and then 6.0 Newton. So your final answer should also be up to 1 decimal place. And now comes to the direction. If for this question, you can represent the direction in two different ways. You can either go for this angle, or you can go for this angle. So how would this statement be if I go for this angle? So if I go for the tick angle, this decision would be, this decision can be written, you can measure this up. Let's say this angle would be, let's say, how many angles, how many degrees? Sin inverse 8 by 6 কত হয়? Sin inverse 6 by 8 করে দেখো তো কত হয় কেউজন? আমার ক্যালকুলেটর খুঁজে পাইতেছি না, মাথা খারাপ।
Sir, আবার বলবেন values গুলো।
Sin inverse 6 by 8.
The 40.6.
It's around 49 degrees.
Okay, let's say 49 degree. আর তাহলে এটা হবে হচ্ছে তোমার কত? আচ্ছা না, আমি সাইন ইনভার্স না, ভুল বলছি, tan ইনভার্স 6/8 হবে। সরি পিপল, মাই ব্যাড, কারণ আমি তো অ্যাডজেসেন্ট এবং বেজ নিয়ে কাজ করতেছি, সরি কেবল অপোজিট এবং বেজ নিয়ে কাজ। tan ইনভার্স 6/8 করলে কত?
36.9
37.
36.9.
about 37 degrees, আর এটা হবে কত? 53 degrees। ঠিক আছে, মনে করো এই দুটো হচ্ছে তোমার মেজার ভ্যালু, সো তুমি প্রত্যেকটা মেজার করলে অ্যাপ্রক্সিমেটলি এরকম ভ্যালু পাবা। So you can write this answer for the duration as either 37 degree with t, comma, downward right, because this is downward right. Or you could also write, if you use that top angle, you could write 53 degree with w, comma, downward right. Either of these expressions are good and scores you full mark. So let's have a look at the mark scheme and
Sir.
let's figure it out, and then I'll take questions. Just give me a second.
Okay, sir.
এটা ছিল হচ্ছে আমাদের কোশ্চেন নাম্বার 7। কোশ্চেন নাম্বার 7 এর মার্ক স্কিমটা একটু দেখে নিই, তারপর আমি তোমাদের কোশ্চেন নিচ্ছি। Diagram of two forces and resultant, W 6 Newton, T 8 Newton, marked on perpendicular forces or scale given 10.0 plus minus 0.2. You see, because you are going to be doing this with drawing, they have allowed you a margin of 0.2 centimeter. So you can, your answer is acceptable from as being as small as 9.8 centimeter, being as big as 10.2 centimeter. So within this range, you have to give this answer. So, and then it goes like this: either 35 to 39 degree from T with horizontal, or 51 to 55 degree from W with vertical, and correct resultant. Correct resultant means downward right. এই পার্টটুকু হচ্ছে downward right. So এই পার্টটুকু তোমাকে মেনশন করতে হবে। মার্ক স্কিমটা, এক্সামিনেশন রিপোর্টটা দেখো। The question asks for a vector diagram to be drawn to find the resultant of two forces. Many candidates found this question difficult, partly because of the complex nature of the diagram. One major error was to draw vector diagrams with a force in the direction of the wire x. Many weaker candidates omitted arrows on lines which may have been meant to be part of a vector diagram. So vector diagram অবশ্যই arrow দিতে হবে. It's important. It's compulsory. Those candidates who started by drawing a horizontal and vertical forces were usually successful, although sometimes the resultant was drawn in the wrong direction. The question asked for the direction of the resultant, and this was often omitted in the answer, but was accepted relative to either the horizontal or vertical, which means you could give your answer either with the horizontal, which would be 35 to 39 degree. We can measure it to 37 degree approximately, or you could also give it with respect to W, which is vertical. It was helpful when candidates drew an angle on their vector diagram to define their angle given as their answer, which means if you are going for this angle, preferably label this angle, don't write anything over here, which makes it easier for the examiners to understand what you're trying to go for. If you want to go give your answer by this angle, label this angle and don't write anything over here and write this other description. So whatever you are going to use, whichever angle that you prefer to use for your answer, it is better if you label that angle with that degree value as well. Lots of important information over here about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Candidates were often successful in calculating the magnitude of the resultant force by using Pythagoras' equation, and this was accepted. So which means in cases where kids could not draw the vector diagram properly, but they just came up with this number, they were given a mark if they did wrote the answer to be 10.0 Newton, irrespective of the drawing. So this was given at least 1 mark to the kids if someone used Pythagorean triangle. That's about the thing. Now I'll take questions. Yes, Zain Bolo.
Sir, how did we find the directions?
By using a protector. You place up your protector in this manner.
No, sir. I'm asking about the directions. Downward right. How did we find?
Sir, the arrowhead.
The resultant would always be aimed from the starting point of the figure to the end point of your figure. You see, you started your vector diagram from here. This is the start point of your first vector. So this comes up over here. Then from the tip, you start your second vector and finish up over here. So your diagram went like this. Your resultant should always be from the start to the end. So if these are your component vectors, your resultant should be like that. That's for the triangle.
I guess she meant by the downward right. Like, how do you know it's downward right, not upward right or upward left?
That's what I said. That the vector, the resultant should always be aimed from the starting point of the first
vector
to the end point of the last vector. That is basically downward right.
Sir, understood.
Okay, Saptoshi.
Sir, the direction between north and east is northeast, right? So instead of writing north of east and east of north, can we directly write northeast? Like 37 degree northeast?
No, 37 degree northeast would mean what? I mean, for those kind of 37 degree northeast would it mean like this or would it mean like this? You are not specifying that. This could mean equivocally two different directions. North of east means it is north of east means this one. East of north means this one. If this value is 45 degree, then that's basically the same line because that basically is half. But if you cannot simply write northeast, not simply writing northeast could be equivocal, could mean two different directions. That's why you have to specify. Or if you find this wording difficult, you can always write this. Let's say মনে করো এই ভ্যালুটা হচ্ছে 37 ডিগ্রি, ঠিক আছে, কোন একটা সার্টেন কোশ্চেনের জন্য তুমি লিখতে পারো হচ্ছে 37 ডিগ্রি northeast, না 37 ডিগ্রি with east towards northeast. 37 ডিগ্রি তুমি কোন সাইডের সাথে বানাইছো? ইস্ট সাইডের সাথে বানাইছো, রাইট?
Yes, sir.
So you could write in that much detail as well. Perfectly acceptable. 37 degree with east towards northeast. Good.
Okay, sir, I got it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Polaban etuk বুঝে গেছে। আমি parallelogram rule task cover করছি না because we are already 5 minutes over time. Maybe you
Sir?
have classes to go to. বলো।
Sir, could we write 37 degrees north of south, like the guy did in the YouTube video?
37 degree north of south would be a pretty weird thing because north would mean that upward direction and south would mean the downward direction. 37 degree north of south would mean you can have 37 degree north of east or north of west. Sorry, ভুল লিখছি। East west হচ্ছে left, east হচ্ছে দিকে। Question
Okay, sir, I got it.
বুঝছো? আনসার পাইছো?
Yes.
Sir.
হ্যাঁ বলো।
Sir, if we shifted the green line to the top, yeah, then the values won't change, right?
Values wouldn't change, but that would have been parallelogram rule, which is a different way to go for this. তোমাদের নোটস এটা লেখা আছে, নোটস থেকে পড়ে যদি বুঝো অ্যাটেম্প করতে পারো, কোনো সমস্যা নাই।
I'm not talking about the parallelogram. I'm talking if we form a triangle.
That would be highly wrong.
Like green.
Because if you go like this, you cannot go for the triangle rule anymore. The basis of triangle rule is that you have to place the component vectors or the part vectors one after another. Only then a completed triangle gives you the result, and this is how the triangle.
Can't we form a triangle? Can't we form a triangle there?
If you do form a triangle over there, this would be a hodgepodge of triangle rule and parallelogram rule. Ultimately, this would be wrong. If you start both of your part vectors from the same point, you should go for the parallelogram rule, which should look like this. I mean, you can complete up this rectangle or parallelogram, and then you have to draw the diagonal, and in that case, the diagonal gives you the result, and that is also okay. Either this or this, but not the halfway point. You cannot start the two vectors starting from the same point and complete the triangle. That would be, that would be a mixture of wrong things.
It basically starts from the head.
Exactly. বুঝে গেল পারছি?
Sir, দুইটা head তো একসাথে touch করবে, right?
এই দুইটা?
Like না, ওই যে first যেটা diagram, okay, sir. Is it no. The main diagram. The two heads meet at a point, right? Of the two line segment.
This one?
No, sir. Main diagram টা.
এখানে?
Yep.
এখানে হ্যাঁ, এই যে এই কম্পোনেন্ট ভেক্টর দুটো এখানে মিট করছে আর resultant resultant is from the tail of the first one to the head of the last one.
Okay.
Let's say if I go for let's say 0.012, then resultant will be 0.
Isn't it supposed to be the tail?
Yeah, this is 0 is the tail of first vector and 2 is the end of the second vector. Resultant is always drawn from the first tail of the starting point of the first vector to the end point of the second vector for the triangle rule.
Okay.
এটা কেন এরকম হয় সেটা ডিটেইল ডিসকাশন আমি বলতেছি না, আমি জাস্ট তোমাদেরকে আকার প্রসিডিউরটা বললাম। ইনশাআল্লাহ ঈদের বন্ধ হবে, এটা নিয়ে আমি আরো ফার্দার আলাপ করব। ডোন্ট ওয়ারি অ্যাবাউট দিস। দিস ইজ নট দ্য এন্ড অফ দিস ডিসকাশন। ইফ ইউ কিডস ফাইন্ড দিস ডিফিকাল্ট টু ডু, স্কিপ দিস প্রবলেমস, নো প্রবলেম, বাট অন্যগুলো অ্যাটেম্প করো, ঠিক আছে?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the additional time of attention. I hope you all the best and Eid Mubarak. Allah Hafiz.
Eid Mubarak.
Sir, Eid Mubarak.
Question জিজ্ঞেস করতে হবে।